This is the audio narration of The Black Pool, a Hamish is not the chosen one tale, written and read by Walter Herbert Reed III, available at Amazon and wherever fine books are sold. Chapter 1, Berhan. Upon a dusty road 3 figures strode, shoulder to shoulder, chins held high. Leather armor cracked and steel plate clinked. As they walked, booted feet splashed carelessly through a solitary mud puddle. The mostly deserted thoroughfare was hemmed in by 2-story buildings of wood and stone. Berhan was a sleepy town to begin with, but the silence at this time of day was peculiar. No peddlers or townsfolk populated the street, though smoke rose into the blue sky from many a chimney. Livestock mooed and cuck-a-doodled. From a few open windows, curious townsfolk watched them pass. All 3 pairs of the men's eyes were suddenly caught by the shimmer of a woman's hair, long and ruddy, gleaming in the late morning sun. She leaned out from a 2nd-story window as she cast a bucket full of foul water down into the gutter. Alongside her, grimy white curtains gently bellowed in the morning breeze. Each man glanced up, but none broke stride. She watched them as they passed. The one in the middle, shorter than the other 2, grinned up at her and winked. She rolled her eyes and slammed the window shut. The houses became sparse as they walked toward the edge of town, eventually giving way to tree and fern. The road turned into wagon tracks and trodden grass. They passed through a glen of dappled sunlight, and upon cresting a hill, they came out to a large field populated by a myriad tents. Cook fires smoldered, and soldiers gathered in groups besmirched by earth and ash. Servants cleaned weapons and armor, and horses whinnied. Knights looked down hawkish noses in judgment as the ragtag trio passed. At this, Brune, widest of shoulder, puffed up his already massive chest. Bowen, a bit taller and lighter than Brune, appeared aloof. Hamish, a head shorter than his lofty comrades, looked back into the eyes of the knights on their high horses. While most of the knights put on a contemptuous air, there were some who nodded, and a few who even grinned in greeting as the men passed. Once they were deeper into the encampment, a pale, raven-haired man, robed in voluminous black wool and a crow-feather cape, came up beside them and matched their pace. He spoke abruptly. "We've a place up front. Sparrow is there already. The Duke's left." "We?" pondered Brune. "You joining us on the front lines, Zaldivar?" asked Bowen, as he gripped the shoulder of the darkly clad man. Zaldivar replied, "Why do you need help lifting that thing?" He pointed his chin at the large double-headed axe that rested on Bowen's toned shoulder. "Help me lift my hammer," jested Brune, hefting his war-hammer, the thick muscles of his arms flexing. Wait, he went on. "I meant this hammer." He clutched his crotch and bellowed merrily. Zaldivar, unimpressed, rolled his eyes. "It's like dealing with children," he mumbled. Bowen and Brune barked laughter. Hamish patted his dark leather helm, looked at the sky and chuckled, while Zaldivar tried to stifle his growing grin. They were coming up to the rear of a line of men and horses 10 or 12 bodies deep, and perhaps 100 long. Wisps of fog had reached out from a nearby copse of trees and tangled around the feet of the warriors and beasts. The line was roughly coordinated into loose ranks of foot soldiers, archers, and mounted knights. As the quartet moved closer, Hamish took hold of Zaldivar by the arm. "We've been paid?" Zaldivar patted something beneath his robes. "Like usual, half." "Fair enough," Hamish assessed, releasing the other man's arm. "See you to the other half afterward, yes?" "Aye." Zaldivar swung around to head back towards the tents. "Luck in battle, gents," he wished them, and rapped his knuckles upon the wooden shield strapped to Hamish's back. Bowen stripped off his tunic and tied it around his waist, leaving a single steel shoulder plate fastened by a leather belt running diagonally across his chest. His steel helmet dangled from his hip, and he ran a hand over his sandy hair. Brune was rolling his thick neck and flexing his shoulders. The fastenings of his plated steel chest-piece and pauldrons creaked as they rubbed at the joints. Brune's hair, darker than Bowen's, was cropped short against his skull, though his impressive black beard reached his chest. They made their way past the readied mounted knights of the cavalry, through the back ranks of archers, and up to the front line, where they stood and looked over the wide field. The rusted iron smell of blood was on the air, and the clamor of battle echoed from smaller melees off in the distance where skirmishes had broken out despite the majority of the army waiting official commencement. Men shouted and cursed. Some jostled one another. Warriors in plate, leather, and scale, and mail of a dozen colors stood or sat on horseback. Their armor was decorated with furs, feathers, and paint, in every condition and every variant one could imagine. It was hard to tell where one company ended and another began, or which group were sellswords and which were sworn blade. Some stood stoic, some cheered. A few first-timers could be spotted by their wide, frightened eyes. Across the green field stood an equally sized force, opposed to the first in nothing much more than the wishes of their lords. Not a cloud dotted the pale blue dome overhead. The sun was burning off the little bit of fog that had escaped the woods. A column of oily black smoke rose from a stand of poplars that had been set ablaze. "Ham!" someone shouted nearby, and Hamish turned to look. The man approached through the crowd, wore similar padded leather to Hamish, but less weathered and uniformly black compared to Ham's worn brown and dull red piecemeal. "There you are, Sparrow," Hamish greeted the man, and they clasped at the wrist. Sparrow peered up from his dark-skinned brow and eyed the three warriors. "What are they fighting over this time, boys? Gods, glory, or gold?" "Greed," replied Bowen flatly, his grey-blue eyes flashing. "Come now, brother," Brune countered. "With all these brave warriors about, there must be a few worshippers among the ranks." "Oh, indeed," Bowen said, looking at his brother. "Worshippers of gold." "Is greed the god we pray to this day, Ham?" Sparrow asked as a grin played across his dusky features. "Father's seeds," Hamish swore, turned his head and spat. "I'd slay no man for less than a silver drachm." "No small purse, that," Brune commented approvingly. "I'm of the same mind." Bowen cut in. "That's the shit of the bull, you two. Brune, I've seen you cut a man down for a quarter of that." "Well," Brune stammered for a moment and stroked his long black beard, "he was a particularly bad man." This was met with laughter all around. Sparrow tied back his chin-length curls of black hair, exposing the dark skin of his face to the sun. "And you were particularly short of coin, I'm sure, eh?" he said. "I'd kill a man for a good turkey dinner." He flashed a white-toothed smile. "Boastful Sparrow," chided Brune, his deep brown eyes cheerful. Sparrow, following Hamish's example, spat onto the ground, and his visage grew a bit more serious. "Die by the sword and all that." "Hamish?" Bowen inquired after a moment. "We're about to go into battle. I know we're all looking forward to spilling our share of blood for our noble patron, the good Duke." He looked around, and they all nodded. "How much is he paying us this time?" Hamish rubbed the stubble on his chin, stubble beginning to show the touch of grey, and smiled ruefully. "Not a silver drachm. Not half, but—" He paused and met each of their eyes, and slowly his smile became a clever grin. "We get to keep what we can carry from the field," he shrugged. Horns sounded along the line, signaling the forces to make ready. The air became electric with an almost palpable excitement. Somewhere nearby someone was shouting a rousing speech, bolstering the morale of those within earshot, but Hamish and his friends only heard every third word of it. The sun crept across the sky as warriors waged their grisly business. The clash of steel and the cry of the brave and the dying melded into a sonorous cacophony of valor and suffering, and the green grass was painted red. Hamish fought against two opposing swordsmen, keeping one step ahead of them by displaying his deft shield skill and executing precise counters with his short spear. In a blur, Bowen cleaved a warrior's head from his shoulders, sending it skyward in a red fountain. Sparrow outclassed a halberd-wielding knight, finding every weakness with his two long blades. All the while Brune chanted ancient heroic poems in a booming baritone, and his hammer crushed the skulls and chests of his foes. Upon a nearby hillock, Zaldivar watched from afar, feeling both a bit jealous and lucky. Jealous that the others were seeing action, lucky that his skill set wasn't suited for large-scale battle. After all, there could be more glory in single combat, or so he told himself. Eventually the day wanted for night, showed its emotion with long shadows and blushing of pink and red in the west. The fervor of battle waned, and the Duke's forces were the clear victors. Hamish and Sparrow sat panting beneath the boughs of a half-burnt oak as the sun sunk into the western horizon. A decent pile of loot was at Hamish's feet. The brothers, Brune and Bowen, and a few others like-minded mercenaries, were still searching the dead. "Not a bad fare, old boy," said Sparrow. kept your eyes on the prize and all of that." "Huh," replied Hamish. He reached a hand behind his braid of long brown hair and scratched the back of his neck. "You would be less a pauper if you would allow yourself a bit of plunder. Mercenaries are permitted such accommodations, you know this." "Don't be waggish," Sparrow stated flatly. "I'm well aware that I'm no longer a sworn blade, but old habits die hard." Hamish looked at his darker-skinned friend and went on delicately. "You could have your own outfit if you wanted. Who knows, retire in a few years' time." "That's just it, Ham." Sparrow looked at the horizon and the ruddy clouds of dusk. "I don't know." "Well," Hamish said as he too gazed towards the setting sun, "I'm neither lord or king, but your sword is always welcome in my little band." They sat silently after that. A wineskin landed between them, tossed from somewhere behind the smouldering oak upon which they leaned. "Everyone still breathing?" asked Zaldivar as he came round and stood beside them. "You are the only person who can sneak up on me, Zaldivar," Sparrow observed as he cleaned the black leather gauntlet with a soiled cloth. "He can sneak up on anyone," mumbled Hamish as he took up the wineskin, uncorked it, and took a long swig before passing it to Sparrow. "Still no loot, Sparrow?" Zaldivar asked. Sparrow sipped the country red. "Just doesn't sit well with me, taking from the dead like that." Hamish reflected. "There are rules to this grim practice, of course. First off, the right isn't always granted. Also, one must not take from knights or the highborn. Their kin are most often out for the bodies early on, but servants, sellswords, low-born men-at-arms, and the rest, fair game. And if one particularly fine heirloom is found, it's not rare to have the item returned to a family member, but not always. The process is gruesome, uncivil, and highly profitable." Zaldivar sat beside them. "It's a churlish tradition, well enough, but it's the world we live in. So, when the lords allow for it, the pragmatic take advantage." "What else is there for men of our ilk?" pondered Sparrow. "Not a hell of a lot," Hamish answered. He whistled shrilly. From where they stood amidst the carnage, Bowen and Brune both looked in the direction of the sound. Sparrow held up the wineskin for the brothers to see. "Ha-hey!" shouted Brune, and they came with armloads of pawnable weapons, armor, and trinkets that shone in the waning light.